Welcome to Off Panel.
Yo everybody, welcome to Off Panel. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the creator of Half Past Danger and its sequel, Dead to Reichs, at IDW, as well as the Once Upon a Time artist on Grayson and Midnighter at DC Comics. It's Stephen Mooney. Thanks for coming on, Stephen.
Thanks for having me, man. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
I do have to say, I know this is probably something I shouldn't admit, but it is always very nice to hear when people actually listen to the podcast, whose work I actually really enjoy. It's like every time I'm like, really? You like me? I feel so pretty.
Well, I do indeed listen to the podcast. Good show.
I appreciate it. So this podcast is all about Half Past Danger and its glorious return. And, I want to talk all about its development and everything like that. But before we do that, I want to start in the most basic and also sometimes difficult to answer place for creators. What is Half Past Danger all about?
Well, the elevator pitch for Half Past Danger at the start was basically dinosaurs versus Nazis. That was the kind of the one mouthful that I could get out without tripping over it, like a lot of other people do when they're trying to describe their own work. But the real truth of what it is, my subtitle that I have written on my wall here is, what if Stephen Mooney was best friends with Captain America? That's the actual pitch for so anyone who's read it will probably understand that. But it's basically a kind of a pastiche of all the stuff that got me going, that energized me as a kid. It's my kind of love letter to Saturday matinee serials. The cliffhangers, the daring do, the narrow escapes, characters like the Shadow, the Phantom, Zorro, Doc Savage, Dick Tracy, all that kind of anything that, on a Saturday afternoon you might turn on, like Where Eagles Dare, or anything that's that, like a team on a mission. That stuff just enchanted me as a kid, and my dad used to put it on for me every Saturday afternoon when he was too busy to look after me or dealing with the real world. So the stuff that just made my heart sing as a 12 or 13-year-old. I'm trying to revisit that now, and comics, as you probably well know, is a slog at times. It's a really tough job. So it's 10 to 12 hours every day for me, 6 days a week, like every other pro who does the job. So the fact that I legitimately sit down and look forward every morning to work on this book is it's huge. It's such a boon. It makes the job for me, and that's basically why it's everything I love rolled into a ball, thrown against the wall, and hopefully some of it sticks,
Mm-hmm. I do really love the idea that it is Stephen Mooney teaming up with Captain America, which I actually like. I don't know. I mean, I think there's some value to it, because it's like a lot of times when you're growing up and you're wanting to be a comic creator, I think a lot of people are growing up and they're wanting to basically, in a way, hang out with these characters that they really love, right? And you're just literally doing that.
Exactly. It was me and Cap getting to punch Hitler on the nose. That's the stuff that got me going. So as there's a place in the world for silly comics. One thing I think my book is, it's not the best book on the stands, it's not the best written, it's not the best drawn, but it is fun.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy it when they read it, and that was my end game, just a competently told narrative that gave people a few chuckles. So I think I achieved that. So it seems that way. People have responded well, and I'm chuckling the whole time when I'm working on the sequel. So I mean, if I can please myself, I'm hoping I can please my peers.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, that was one of the things I wrote this down because I didn't really know how to question or ask this question, but it is kind of something that I'm always interested by. I feel like to back up really quick, in the back of the first volume, I think you say that Jordi Belair, who colored most of the first volume, described Half Past Danger as Spielbergian, like Steven Spielberg. And I think that's like weirdly a vein that comics almost never taps into, and even movies these days rarely tap into it. It's like I mean, you look at like The Mummy when it was in like 1999 when Brendan Fraser was in it, and that was this amazing kind of Indiana Jones style like adventure movie. And then they do this new one, and it's like this shared universe, like super serious, like I don't know, it's just like no appeal to it. But I don't know, I kind of feel like a lot of times storytelling is afraid of telling adventure stories anymore that actually are fun and kind of wear their heart on the sleeve. So I really appreciate things like this.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We had this conversation, myself and Dec Shalvey, and a friend of ours, went to see The Mummy, And we're big fans of the Universal Mummy films from the 90s, the late 90s. And we came out of that film. I don't know if you've seen the Tom Cruise version. Oh, you haven't missed much, man. It doesn't know what it wants to be. The tone is all over the place. I mean, there's a their attempt at a legitimate scare, and then they have a punchline after the scare, and you're not sure whether you're supposed to be scared or whether you're supposed to be entertained or laughing. It's very strange. Like they shoot for so many different tones that they miss them all. Mm-hmm. Whereas the 99 Mummy was a straightforward action adventure romp, like you say, and I enjoyed the hell out of that movie. I think the second and third one weren't so great, but the first one was a really decent film, mm-hmm. Good slice of action. And I worked on the Mummy at IDW. Actually, I'll use this as a segue. I did a book with a writer called Josh Jabkuga, which was a sequel to the third Mummy film. So I got to work in that universe, and it was just Brendan Fraser. The other characters weren't around. And it was kind of the precursor to Half Past Danger in a way. I had done a lot of stuff at IDW for the previous 5 or 6 years, but this book was all about adventure and ridiculous scenarios in fantastical locations that had nothing to do with actors or TV or any of the stuff that I'd done a lot of before. And it really kind of lit a fire under my ass that I was like, this is the kind of stuff I want to be doing professionally.
Yeah. I do find it fascinating, though, that comics really does kind of feel like a medium that would work really well with adventure stories. And it seems like a lot of times it doesn't dive into that. And I find that to be really odd, but I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Well, I know why it is. It's because we're all so horribly cynical now, at least marketing people are. I mean, it's not cool to be fun, I think that was the glorious thing about Wonder Woman. That was just a straight ahead adventure. Mm-hmm. And then people responded hugely to it because, I mean, I'm a DC fan. I work on and off for DC, and I love those characters, but I wasn't the biggest fan of the previous films because I felt like they kind of missed the mark on the characters. To me, Superman is that beacon of hope, and he smiles and he looks to the heavens, and he's a happy guy who wants to help other guys. He's not a tortured demigod who doesn't know his place in the universe. To me, he's not anyway. But I think with Wonder Woman, they nailed that character. So I was delighted with that film. Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, and I remember Patty Jenkins herself saying they weren't afraid to be earnest and hopeful and put their hearts on their sleeves, and that seems to have paid off because it's a dichotomy now. It's so opposed to what the norm is, which is the cynical, grim, dark, everything's raining, everything's shot, you can barely see what's happening on the screen, it's so dark. So Wonder Woman was a nice antidote to that, I thought. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I actually do really appreciate like the earnest and hopeful stuff. It like Wonder Woman actually kind of felt like a sea of like, I don't know. Like it was like I felt like a respite from it, from all the other stuff that happens like in movies and everything like that. But let's go back to Half Past Danger. I know it wasn't your first project. You'd done many things before that, but it was your first project that was all your own. When did you first start developing the idea? Did you already have the idea before you did The Mummy, or did it kind of start spinning out of that when you decide that you really like telling stories in that vein?
The Mummy cemented it for me. I'm trying to remember what year. The Mummy would have been about 2 years before Half Past Danger. I had been doing a ton of like Angel when it was Joss Whedon was on it at IDW, and a writer called Brian Lynch, a fantastic writer he's writing movies now, like the Minions movies and Despicable Me and all that kind of stuff. So he's a really, really solid writer, and he kind of influenced me a lot. I wouldn't say I'm that confident as a writer, although I am a little bit more confident now, but I was terrified, and that stopped me doing it for a little while. Mm-hmm. It was always my intention to do my own book on it, because like so many people in comics, I'm such a control freak. And you can see that even in the first Half Past Danger, like you say, Geordie came on, she started on issue 2. Originally I had intended and wanted to do absolutely everything myself, but I just realized it was such a tremendous amount of work that it would have been 5 years before the book saw the light of day if I colored it and everything, because I'm so slow at coloring. So getting Geordie was just such a godsend, because she was so green and fresh at that point, and so like eager to put the work in. It was just a fantastic time to get her back when I could afford her. You know, she's not happy too. I tease her about that all the time, but she did want, for the record, she was on Half Past Danger too, but it was just a workload thing, and I was the one who decided that she God bless her, thought she could do all of her 50 other books and manage Half Past 2, but she just couldn't do it in the end. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know. Isn't it Triona Farrell that's taken over?
Triona Farrell, yeah, who's like suddenly this brilliant colorist. I'm such a lucky like person. That's me reeling in my language, by the way. Because Trina now she's on lots of really cool up and coming books and interesting projects, and I think I got her right at that sweet spot as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, we tried out a few different people, and obviously, I like the Irish angle. I like to foster that whenever we can. But she's really, really talented, and the stuff I'll send you on some previous stuff after this. She's done some amazing work on it, so I'm really happy with how it's looking.
Maybe apparently working with you on Half Past Danger is like an amazing way to like break somebody's career as a colorist or something like that. So maybe in the third one, you're gonna have some other up and comer, and then all of a sudden they're gonna get like crazy amounts of work.
Yeah, well, you get Jordy on the show and see what she has to say about that.
Oh, I'm probably gonna get an email from Jordy about that.
Probably she's gonna text me in 2 seconds.
What are you saying?
Yeah.
So for Half Past Danger, from what I read, there were 3 places you had considered publishing it: IDW, Image, and Dark Horse, with you ultimately choosing IDW. So what made that the right fit? I know you'd done work for them before, but was it related to that, or is it just like it seemed like the right place for it?
100% related to that. To be honest, it was because Chris Ryle is a good friend of mine, and he's kind of the big cheese over at IDW. So I knew it's again, it's a cynical thing, but it's about, sometimes it's about who you know and the place and time. And I knew he was a fan of that kind of material, and IDW were trying to push their own creator books, maybe as a response to how well Image were doing at the time, and still are. I don't know, but I know they were looking for like quality independent books. So I went to him with it, and he straight away, they pitched it. They have the last Friday of every month. They have all the editorial are in there, and they pitch books that people have submitted. And so he said it went down really well. Everybody loved the name, apparently, so that's what so the name got me in. As nondescript as it is, when you really think about the name, could be anything.
That is one thing I do really love about the book. Even before I read it, it was like this. I always had this pull to it because I thought the name was really fantastic.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, that seems to be across the board. I mean, it's just I was coming up with it and designing the logo and everything. I was like, this is kind of silly, but is it just the right side of silly? Is it a little tongue in cheek, or is it just on the side of parody? So as long as everything is away from parody and on the side of tongue in cheek, I'm happy if I can hit that tone.
Well, I mean, and I think that actually ties like that tone is like exactly what you're talking about when it comes to like the best adventure movies. Is you kind of want to be bordering on silly, but not quite getting there.
Exactly.
And I feel like you really accomplished that well. And also, I do want to, this is getting ahead of myself, but I have to say, Dead to Reichs is even better. And really quick, so the second volume is called Half Past Danger 2, Dead to Reichs, right?
Yes.
And I'm curious, what was the origin of that? How did that come together? Like the Dead to Reichs name?
I'll tell you, because I wish I could take all the credit for it, but I can't. I had a list of about 10 ridiculous titles in the same vein, and I still have tons of them. I should read some of them off to you, actually, if I open them up here. But I was struggling to come up with a name that I thought was good enough for the sequel. So as you were saying, the Irish community, we're quite small, but we're very tight-knit. So we all talk to each other. So I kind of did just a little poll among all the guys and gals, just getting names, because they all know the kind of the flavor of HPD. So they would all know the kind of stuff I'm looking for. So I've got some really, really good stuff. It was actually Aaron. I don't know if you've ever talked to Aaron, who's Deck and Jordy's assistant.
Oh, Aaron. What is his last name? Is it actually Aaron Fever?
Yeah, don't listen to Jordy. It's Aaron, not Aaron. But he came up with Dead to Rights, which I fell in love with immediately. So as much as I'd love to take the credit for that particular title, it wasn't me, but it did fit 100%. So that's where that one came from. I have a list of at least 35 other possible titles. Wow. Some of them are gold, but I'm kind of holding on to them as well in case
Volume 3
in case it goes nowhere. Half Past Danger 11, Eins weit.
That's amazing. I actually, so do you know, this is a really random question, but are you familiar with the origin story of the name Dog Welder from Hitman?
No, I'm not. And I know John McCrae pretty well, actually, but I don't know the story. What's the story?
So I could be mistaken about this, but from what I understand, basically it was, they were like sitting around drinking in a pub, and they, I think it was, I think it was Ennis, and it was McCree, and it was I may be mistaken, but for some reason I thought Steve Dillon was involved somehow, and somebody had tasked them with coming up with a name more ridiculous than Green Lantern. and so like they were in the pub and they're like, yeah, how about Dog Welder? And then that became a character in Hitman. Weirdly, I have like this very strong affinity for Dog Welder, mostly because it's the most insane character that's ever existed. But I just kind of imagine like a lot of comic book ideas that we're not really aware of. Their origin story is often tied to being in a bar with friends and just coming up with these ridiculous concepts. Not saying Dead Reichs came from that, but that's kind of what my headcanon was, I guess.
That's literally where Dead Reichs came from. We wrote a list in a pub in Dublin. So you're bang on the money. And speaking of dog welder, my only original art I have of John's is a nice dog welder drawing beside one by Garth as well. They both drew him for me. So 2 little dog welder sketches beside each other. He's my favorite character too.
Oh, that is so amazing. I'm very envious of that. Yeah, so I want to actually ask, going back to IDW and everything, you said Chris Ryall was, God, I never know how to pronounce that. Ryall?
Just Ryle, yeah. It comes from Riley, the Irish name, so it's Ryle.
Oh, okay. So, I've been familiar with his stuff for a long time, back even before he was at IDW. And I know he's the grand poobah at IDW these days, but it sounds like he was kind of like an evangelist who really believed in the project. What was his impact like, both from you, getting the momentum to do Half Past Danger, but also like, I know he's the editor. I believe he was the editor on the book. What was his impact as far as creative? Like, did he help push you in some directions that really helped the book out? Not really.
He was the editor. To be 100% honest, he totally let me at it myself. The thing he knew was that I'd never missed a deadline with them for the previous 5 years. So he knew what my work looked like, but he had no idea. Like I say, I'd never written a professional comic book before. So I sent him on. I wrote the complete series and sent that on to him just for his notes. And he had very few notes. He more pointed out what he liked about it than negatives. And then he did the basic editorial stuff of a couple of script notes, a bit of proofreading, etc. But when it came to direction, he really just let me. Whether it was for better or for worse, or whether he just had that much confidence in it, I don't know. But he just let me kind of tell the story I had written, which is a bit of a gift. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons so many people are migrating over to these places now to do their own books, because editorial and the big two have such a hard time with all the mandates they get now from marketing and licensing and everything else. There's a lot of back and forth and little tweaks and things that the artist or writer might not see as being as necessary as editorial are told it is. Which is not to cast any aspersions. I can understand that's how the world works, but it does add a layer of difficulty to a project. Whereas when you're doing your own thing, I mean, I showed the lads here, Deck, Shalvey, Nick Roach, Geordie, they read the script of both early on and gave me, like, if they thought something sucked, we're very honest with each other. So if they thought something was off, they would absolutely say so, and vice versa. If they thought something was strong, they would say, push this is a good element, more of this. So that for me was almost enough editorial. And I mean, even these days, like Deck, he's writing a series for Marvel. I don't know if it's been announced yet. So, but it's 2 great characters that he's actually writing. So he would send that on to me, and I'd give it my script edit, and we send each other everything. So it's a really, really valuable resource. But when it came to Chris, no, it was just kind of, do your own thing, deliver to us by the date you say you're going to deliver to us, and we'll publish it.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I was both terrified by that and delighted, because I meant I was flying without any, stabilizing wings. I was just on my own. But it also was like kind of thrilling to have that kind of freedom.
Mm-hmm. I remember I had a conversation with Eric Stevenson a few years ago, Eric Stevenson, publisher of Image. And he was saying about how, like, creator owned isn't necessarily for everyone. Like some people need that structure that like Marvel or DC or like whatever the more hardcore editorial element would be like to actually do their best work. Other people actually, they crave that kind of creative control and that freedom that doing creator owned, gives them. Seems like you're definitely on the latter side.
Yeah, I am. I mean, I've got some amazing notes, like people like Mark Doyle and in the Bat Office in DC, like that's contribute really, really good stuff. And I'm only like, I just draw comics for them. I've never written anything for DC, so I wouldn't even. You can kind of compartmentalize yourself that way. Like I get sent the script and that's the script and I would draw that. That's how it works. I mean, I can have ideas, maybe swap a couple of panels around, or the pacing can be slightly different, but the story is the story. Mm-hmm. So completely respect that discipline. And I know, I mean, I'm sure you know as well, plenty of people now, even at Image, are looking to hire their own editorial so that they can have that little bit of a conveyor belt going where they send in a script for notes and somebody will give them input as opposed to just them doing their own vision, their own blanket idea as to what is or is not going to happen. So, like you say, different strokes for different folks,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's no reason why you can't be, versatile and be able to do both of those things. It does seem though that like creator owned, it's like if you don't really have that gear in you where you really want to control everything and you want to be able to tell your own story, it's you can't just like start working in that versus you who, you can work with a, editorial staff because you have that experience and you like getting those notes and everything like that. But I think it's harder to go the other way if you don't really have that in you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'd say that can really grate on some people who aren't used to even suggestions from other people. But I think if you're realistic enough and you want to be a full-on professional in this industry, that's just something you have to deal with and embrace, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned this earlier. You in the first issue of Half Past Danger, you did everything. You wrote it. You had pencils, inks, colors, letters, everything, design. Yeah. How quickly did you realize you had made a huge mistake doing that?
Oh, so quickly.
Was it just like because it was going slowly, or is it just because you're like, what have I done to myself?
No, it's exactly the former. The truth is I could do it all myself, right, but it would take me twice as long. I'm a slow colorist. I generally, if I'm doing covers for, say, Valiant or Dynamite or IDW or something, I will generally color those myself because it's a one-off and a single piece and it's fun to do the colors. But interiors, believe it or not, it was taking me longer to color one page than to pencil and ink one page, which is crazy. So, because I kept second guessing myself.
Well, and also like, I think at a certain point, because you've been drawing for so long, pencil and inking is like, it's intuitive. It's what you know. While coloring is a little bit more outside your comfort zone, right?
Yeah. At least at that stage it was. I mean, I feel a bit better about it now, but I've also come to realize, relying on other people for things is not a weakness. It's a big good thing. Whereas before I was like, I can do this all myself. I'll show those guys. I don't know who the hell I was showing. All I did was show myself that I indeed could not do it. Jordy, like as soon as Jordy came on board, everything really started to kick into gear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, there isn't like a noticeable. I mean, there is like a little bit, but I don't really feel like the first issue looks so different from the rest of it. Did Jordy try to like kind of match what you'd already done, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. As far as palette goes, yes, she basically did her twist on what I had established, which is exactly what I wanted her. So hers, to me, is just a better version of what I had done, which is 100% what I was hoping for.
So she was basically doing a Stephen Mooney impression, but like the best possible impression humanly possible as far as the colors.
Exactly.
I love it. Okay, so I want to take a quick turn before we get into Dead to Reichs. We already talked about the fact you worked at DC on Grayson and Midnighter. And actually, I do want to give you credit. I know like some people weren't overly fond of this issue because of the structure and everything, but you actually did my favorite issue of Grayson, which was the Futures in one shot. I thought that was a really great issue.
Thanks. We were really happy with how it turned out, Tom and I. And I think most people liked it. There was definitely some people who did not, though. But I mean, it was such a departure in a lot of ways for a mainstream Big Two comic. It was quite I would call it quite cerebral. Not that a lot of them aren't, but Tom really wrote the hell out of that book. Like, you should have seen the script. It was like Alan Moore wrote it. It was I could have like used it as a coffee table.
That's awesome. Well, it was like sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, God bless him. He loves his 9-panel grids. Like everybody he works with, he just wants to do those 9-panel grids. So you gotta be prepared to step up.
Yeah, I was, but when I actually think it's the part of the reason why, like, some people didn't particularly like it was because it is a very challenging structure, but at the same time, I don't know, I thought it was a very rewarding structure too, and it read really well, and you did a hell of a job on it as well. So I'm sure it was fun to dive into those worlds, but I'm curious, like, do you feel like that time at DC helped you level up at all as an artist, or do you think that like was the experience much the same as it was with any other comic project, like the IDW stuff you'd done in the past, for example?
I think it definitely helped my profile.
Sure.
As far as actual work, I'm pretty happy with a lot of it. A lot of it had to be done very quickly. So, when I do my own book, I give myself at least 6 weeks, say, for an issue. Whereas at DC or Marvel, a lot of the time it's 4 to 5 weeks, which is a decent difference. I mean, it's doable, but it's tighter. I think Half Past Danger, I felt like suddenly people kind of knew who I was a little bit more. I don't think anybody knew who I was before that.
Mm-hmm.
I still don't think. I mean, I certainly wouldn't class myself as in any way well known. I think I'm still kind of flying under the radar a little bit, but only in a way that's fine with me. I think I'm just doing okay, which isn't too bad. But I definitely felt like I was. When you're a kid, right? I don't know if you had aspirations of. I don't. Do you have aspirations of working in comics yourself at all, or
No.
don't? No. Okay. But when I was a kid, and my peers, like the artists, the other Dublin guys I used to draw comics with, our end game was to work for Marvel or DC. That was our end game,
Mm-hmm.
to draw comics for Marvel or DC. So the older I got, after doing work for hire comics for say 5 or 6 years, my end game had actually shifted a little bit then to telling my own stories, because I've been drawing other people's scripts for so long that I felt like I could probably make a decent stab of it. And having read so many good examples of what made a good script and what told a strong story, I felt confident enough that I could at least have a decent go at it myself. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of where my ambitions lay at that point. And then I met, it was because, do you want me to, I can tell you exactly how I got the DC thing if you're interested.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know if you've heard of the Big Bang store, of course. Everyone knows the Big Bang store. Yeah. So they used to put on a show, and they may still do it in the future, called Dice in Dublin, which was Dublin International Comic Expo. And they had some really good guests like Jim Lee and people like that over the years. And Scott Snyder was there. I think it was 2014 or 2015. And Half Past Danger was in the process of coming out. So Deck introduces me to everyone in the industry like he does for everyone else. He knows absolutely everyone. I don't know how or why, but they all seem to like him. It's a different thing entirely. So he was introducing me to Scott in this pub in Dublin, and Scott goes, "Oh, you're the Half Past Danger guy." And I was like, "Yeah. How did you know that?" And he's like, "Oh, because I read it."
Oh.
And I was like, oh, I can't say the word I said, but I said, "BS, you do." I was like, "Yeah, right, you do, buddy. Pull the other one." And he's like, "No, I read it." I was like, "Okay, well, name all the main characters." So he named all the main characters. I was like, "Man, this guy reads my book. He's a real comic writer." And he was like, "Yeah, I really like it. So would you like to do anything with us?" And I was like, "Where do I sign? Of course I would, absolutely." And then he literally just recommended me to editorial, and I was off to the races. After years, 10 years before that, I'd been sending the submissions like everybody else, going to all the conventions, showing my portfolio, and Marvel and DC was completely the end game. But then I kind of stumbled my way into DC, into the Bat Office, which is the one where I wanted to be if I was going to be anywhere in DC, just by doing my own book, So it's kind of like serendipitous in that way. And I feel like, but I mean, I listened, like the last episode I listened to of your show, it was like everyone has their own way that they got in. There is no A, B, C, and D, complete sign here and you're in. That doesn't happen. Everyone has their own little story of how they got in. So that's how I arrived at DC, and Scott just recommended me. And then when Mark had something that I fit, he just said, "Listen, do you want to do this Nightwing book?" At the time, it was a Nightwing book before he became Grayson. Mm-hmm. Nightwing has always been my favorite DC character, along with Selena Kyle, Catwoman. So I was ecstatic to find out that I would be working on Nightwing first. And they told me, they're like, "Okay, you're going to do these Nightwing books, but one caveat, he's not called Nightwing anymore. He's called Grayson now, and he's a secret agent." And I was like, "What?" Man, I want to do Nightwing. Now, I have to say, I thought Grayson was a great book. And when I started working on it, Tom and Tim Seeley, the co-writer, did an amazing job, I think. And Mikhail Yanin, the main artist, it was a great book. So I was really happy the way it worked out. But I was a little bit disappointed at the time. I was like, "Oh, man, no bluebird on his chest, no fighting sticks, that kind of stuff." But that's just me being a baby.
Oh, no, I would have been all about that, too, because I grew up, I was coming up during the Dixon Nightwing stuff.
Oh, yes.
And man, Dixon and Scott McDaniel on those books were my jam when I was a kid. So I would have been right there with you.
Yeah, same.
I do think it is worthwhile. Everyone has a different story about how they break in, but the commonality between all of them is the people who do break in put themselves out there, whether that means making their own comics or, meeting with people or doing whatever. You kind of, you just, it's like you have to kind of do the work to make it in, and you can't just expect success to come to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, that is the case. I mentioned earlier on that I wasn't a Twitter fan. That's the same kind of thing. You need to be on these social media sites and showing your process and trying to charm people and making yourself a known commodity, basically. So you're absolutely right. I know a lot of talented people who did not make it into the industry because they weren't prepared to play that game. Right.
Yeah, and some people, that's actually one of my biggest weaknesses. I I hate the concept of networking. I don't know what it is about it. It's like I can talk to anybody for forever about any number of subjects, but as soon as it becomes something that resembles networking, I like kind of shell up really strangely. I don't know why. I need to get over that.
Well, listen, I'm exactly the same. And as far as I'm concerned, it's because you probably have a little bit of humility about you and you don't like banging your own drum, which I think you could say about a lot of decent people. I mean, it's very hard to sell yourself when you don't think it's a charming thing to do, to be telling everybody how great you are, which is what networking boils down to. So it's a tough one to crack, you know?
Yeah, it just feels kind of disingenuous to me, I guess.
Agreed.
So I do want to say one thing I think is really funny about your time at DC. Reading Half Past Danger, like, you have like the Agent Huntington Moss is like one of like the classic, femme fatale beauties and everything like that. But then you go to DC and then somehow I think people think you're like a beefcake artist now. And I find that to be really hilarious.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of the Midnighter. I think I got the most response when I was on the Midnighter arc I did was because it was Grayson guest starring in Midnighter for an arc. So they gave it to me and I actually really enjoyed it. It was fantastic. The script was really good. But it was very bro-y, beefcakey, like it just turned out that way, but in a sarcastic kind of a way. But yeah, I did get a lot of that actually now that you mentioned it, which is fine. I listen, I'll take it. I'll draw a handsome man or a handsome woman, it's all the same to me. I just like to draw, like some people are really good at drawing gritty, ugly things. I am rubbish at that, but I can draw that kind of old-fashioned, pretty looking people thing. And I have to say I really enjoy doing it. So I'm not ashamed to say that that's one of my favorite things to do. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that you actually do better with the gritty stuff than you give yourself credit for. Not that like Half Past Danger is filled with gritty stuff, but I mean it's like they're in the jungle. They're not like always in like the most beautiful. I mean, like it is a beautiful place, but like not the most like they're not like balls or anything like that.
True, I guess so. Yeah.
Okay, so you did your time at DC. You're making a name for yourself over there. You moved back to Half Past Danger. What made now the right time for going back to Half Past Danger?
To be honest, because it's weirdly, it had become all I wanted to do. Because I spent the year doing the first one, or more like a year and a half. And then I was at DC for the 2 years following. I kind of like, once the initial like wow factor of being at DC and the much better paychecks, which were nice, and royalties, which are still great, and worn off, I realized that I really just wanted to be telling my own stories. And it sounds like a simplistic thing to say, but it's true. I was like, I could be making myself a little bit more happy. Now, don't get me wrong, I was grinning. I got to draw Catwoman, Batman was in 4 of my issues. Like, that stuff is bucket list stuff for me. I'm so delighted that I got to do it. And I did actually, there was more DC work there if I had wanted, like, and hopefully in the future, if I want, like we left on very good terms, and they certainly aren't missing me. You know what I mean? I was only like a B-list guy at best there, which is fine. But I just, every morning I was getting up and going, oh man, I cannot wait to get back to Half Past Danger, because I've had the script written for a long time. It's written as a trilogy, and I laid out the beats for the entire thing way back at the start. So I know all the cool stuff that's coming up that I get to draw and that happens and everything. So I was just really excited to get back to it. Mm-hmm. Plus, I saved up enough money working for Real Comics that I could take a year where I didn't get paid, which is the other half of the real truth. I don't make a lot of money off the creator-owned stuff. I mean, I make some, but not compared to, working at DC or whatever. So that's the honest truth.
Yeah, and even then, it's like it's like, when you're getting paid up front for the work that you're doing, when you're getting a page rate and everything like that, that's way different than getting paid for creator-owned comics.
Hugely different. I'll tell you, I am, on that note, which is a very, very relevant fact. I'm also working on another creator-owned book at the moment that's going to be out from Image next year. I can't say too much about it now. I'm working with somebody else from the Bat Office on that one, a really good writer. I'm just drawing this one. So that was initially going to be my next project last year, but we got halfway through that book. Like, we have 3 issues in the can of that book, but then there was just life reasons that came up that we had to shelve it for a little bit. Mm-hmm. And luckily enough, I had HPT2 just sitting there waiting for me to get back to it. So I jumped straight onto that and concentrated on that. But my point is, as you say, with the money, because there's no upfront right now, I've now gone over a year without actually getting paid for drawing anything interior. I mean, I've done a good few covers, and I've actually written a few books, which has been nice, and got checks for those, which is fine. But yeah, no, I seriously, I'm waiting for my next payday at this point.
Yeah. I do think it's really funny that like the first time you did Half Past Danger, you try to do everything yourself, and then this
Yeah.
time you have two creator-owned books, so it's like you have a different wrinkle on top of that. It's like you have the not that you're actively working on both at the same time, but I do think it's funny that you have like two things stacked on top of each other. It's like you're always trying to work in like I don't know. You have a lot of work going on at all times. It seems like you like to stay busy, I guess.
Yeah, and I know the next two things I'm doing after that as well, which is crazy. Like so far, I work up till I think it's like the middle of 2019 now, which is that's the big difference. Like before Half Past Danger, I didn't know what I was doing 3 or 4 months down the line, but now I feel that like we're as comic book pros, we're all so terrified that someone is going to take it away from us and make us get a real job at some point.
Mm-hmm.
That it job security aspect is so fleeting and this nebulous thing that it's so hard to grasp. That when you have like a year or two's work lined out for you, it's great. It's like it's so rare that it's just this glorious beacon in front of you that like you can really latch onto. And Half Past Danger also represented that to me because I knew that was at least a year that a lot of people had always asked me about it, cons, when is there more Half Past Danger, etc. So I knew I could sell this book and I'd be okay. So it's that's kind of a more mercenary aspect of the whole thing. But listen, it's life, I've got a mortgage, so that's the way it goes.
Well, I mean, and I think one thing that I hope all my listeners pick up on while listening to this is it's like people. I think a lot of times people think these books like manifest themselves like spontaneously in shops randomly on Wednesday, but like creators are grinding and they're trying. The best thing that they can do is create something good enough that will get them the next gig, and then they keep rolling and they keep rolling and they keep rolling. And I do have to say, like even if Half Past Danger, the first volume, wasn't like some sort of like insane success or something like that, it has paid off in the sense that it got you DC work, it got your name out there, and it proved that you could do it.
Yeah, 100%. Now it actually turns out it did okay. Like, so I'm not. Thankfully, it did okay. But yeah, that the total end game there was to hopefully maybe get myself in front of some more people and show them what I could do a little bit more. I mean, I talked about so many times with Deck about that being the real end game to the whole thing.
Well, and it is also kind of awesome too because you had that that was something that you were doing, but at the same time, it also you found it was like something that really spoke to you, being able to tell your own stories, and that I don't know. I mean, I imagine that once you kind of get that feeling once, it's like you want to keep coming back to it every once in a while, just because it's a much more fulfilling creator experience, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly that pertains to your previous question about why I went back to it a lot.
Mm-hmm. So, for listeners, what, we know the first one was Stephen Mooney and Captain America teaming up to fight Nazis and sometimes dinosaurs. What is the second one all about? What is Dead to Reichs all about?
Well, it's pretty much picks up right after the end of one. So there's a lot of that carries straight forward. Obviously, Agent Moss is a huge element because she's not their friend so much anymore. So she has her side.
I just have to say one thing really quick. Agent Moss, that panel you posted on Twitter was amazing. Like the inks and everything.
Yeah. Well, that's the kind of stuff I'm getting to do now. It's like she is completely her own entity. Like if I could do an Agent Moss series, I'd do it in a heartbeat. Like the stuff she gets up to off camera is crazy. So I get into a lot more of that in the second one, and she's a lot more prominent. I would say the biggest difference in two is that she gets a lot more. Now, Irish and John and Ishii are still like the guys, and Ishii's not around at the start. Something's happened he's disappeared. They have to get the band back together a little bit on that score. But Moss that's the big difference. I would say it centers on her a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you still have all the banter with the guys and all the gags and everything, so people don't have to worry that stuff is gone. But I'm just really interested in Moss. Like that's like as you say, that archetypical femme fatale character. There's a bit of a wrinkle to that now in the next one that she might not be as archetypical as first appears. So I'm hoping that people will be interested in that.
I have to say one of my favorite moments, like one of the things that comes back to my head as I'm like thinking about the book, and it's not like a huge moment, but it's this one that like I was just like, oh man, I don't really know what's actually happening here. Was when Ishii was like standing outside the tent and he was kind of like looking in, and it's like he knew. You
may just have hit on the premise of the entire sequel.
Oh, all right.
So you're on the right track.
All right. As long as there's Ishii and his dinosaur, that's all I really care about. It was
called Spot, even though he's covered in. It really pisses Irish off that he called him Spot because he's got these stripes all down his back. So Irish can't deal with that at all. Yeah, so there's lots of Spot. Yeah, he's the one dinosaur you're guaranteed. Because the rest of them are dead.
Yeah, exactly. Because they, God, I mean, that was a hell of a thing. I don't. If you haven't read Half Past Danger, you should read it. But it is. I had to pour one out for those dinosaurs. Poor dinosaurs. And
It's pretty spinal.
what was okay? And this is sad because Scott Snyder would probably yell at me because I don't remember all the character names. What was the scientist, the woman who was in love with the dinosaurs?
That's Greta. Dr.
Greta.
Schmidt.
Is she going to play a role in the second one? I'm just curious because I really liked her.
Yes, yeah. She is recruited by the US at the start of the second one as their expert in paleontology because she's a free agent basically after they rescue them all at the end of the first one. So she will become the US expert as opposed to the German expert.
So
work for them.
So with jumping back into the second volume, I know that you had a plan for all this. Like you knew where you were going. It was based to be, or it was going to be a trilogy and everything like that. How easy was it to jump back into this world? Was it pretty easy for you, or did you kind of like take a bit to start getting the flow again?
It was like crossing the road.
Wow.
It was absolutely a breeze. Which to me just points out, it sounds so wanky to say it, but it feels like it's what I should be doing, that kind of a thing. So I don't often get that feeling, so I'm trying to run with it. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think there's something to be said about that because it's like when something feels right, it feels right, and you know it from the start.
Yeah, well, listen, to be honest with you, there's so much of myself in this book. I mean, I do kind of write, like a lot of people who write, the main character is basically me.
Right.
And he's a lot braver than I am, but he basically, the annoying wise ass side of him is basically me. So I kind of write him as myself, and that's the easiest thing in the world to do because he responds like I would respond. And then the other characters, to me, that just makes them so much more interesting. Like, I know working on Irish is no fun for me because it's just like, I mean, the stupidest thing I ever did was try and make him look like myself. Like, what the hell was I thinking? I thought it'd be fun for the first couple of covers, and I was like, I'm in a comic book. But now I have to draw like 8 pictures of myself every day. And it's I'm just watching myself age slowly. It's horrendous. So that, yeah, I mean, it's still fun and people get a kick out of it. But yeah, I mean, that would be the one thing I might do differently if I was starting over. But I love the other characters. Like, they are all quite archetypical, but I think they all have their own little bit of something to them that you don't get anywhere else. Like my spin on that, say, the Captain America archetype or the Storm Shadow from G.I. Joe, Silent Ninja archetype, that's Ishii, that kind of a thing. Like, or I always feel like Agent Moss is basically if James Bond and Selena Kyle had a child, this would be their daughter. That's how to my mind, that's who she is. 2 of my favorites. So it's just so much fun to like. The stuff has all been done before. There's nothing revolutionary in my book, but what hasn't been done before is my take on this stuff. That's right. New. And what I have to offer. I'm so mired in all this stuff since I was a kid. It's the one story I knew I could tell relatively well. I got offered all these pulp books to write after Half Past Danger did well. And I had to turn most of them down because I didn't know the characters intimately enough that I felt like I could tell a really good story.
Sure.
I just did a Phantom book over here because I love the Phantom and I know I can do a decent Phantom book story. So that I took, but I had been offered a good few of those things that I didn't feel like I was well enough established, just in my own mind even, that I could take it on. Mm-hmm. But I've got a lot of confidence since because the reviews for Half Past Danger were so ridiculously good. Like, I found myself disagreeing with half of them, but I mean. Out of the time,
It's like you're saying you're too kind. You're like, but seriously, you're being too kind.
Yeah, no, seriously. That's exactly what I was like. Really? You like that bit, huh?
Oh, I do want to give you another compliment. I really enjoyed the part where you had Captain America throw yourself out of a bar and then you took a drag of the cigarette from the hobo, which I thought was really perfect. But, I do have to give you credit, though, because it's like a book like that easily could become so focused on its influences that it feels derivative, but it feels entire, like you said, you gave it your own spin and it really feels like its own thing because of that.
Yeah, that's another thing. I was terrified of walking that tightrope. That was one of my fears going in. It's like, will people just consider me a hack who's taking other people's ideas and repeating them? I think I don't give myself a lot of credit usually, but I do think I managed to, like you say, I think it is my own thing at the end of the day, just about.
Mm-hmm. So I just have a few more questions. I want to ask about how you work. I know everyone is different in how they write and how they draw, and sometimes when you're doing both, it can give you shortcuts or like completely change how you do things entirely. What's your process from like writing to like closing out an issue for like Dead to Reichs?
I write pretty full script for myself, but I don't describe any shots. I just put down character A enters stage right, speaks in this order, followed by character B, character C, etc. I don't at all describe how the camera will see that shot, though.
So you just figure out in layouts or something?
Exactly. I do my layouts right on the script page. Then once I printed out the script, I have little thumbnails on all the script pages. Like if you had my scripts for Half Past Danger, all the original thumbnails that correspond to the pages are all right there on the script.
Mm-hmm.
So I like, yeah, basically shorthand is right. Like the dialogue is generally there. I mean, because I letter it myself, I do add in, if I think a punchline lands a little harder, the second time I read through it, I might change that a little bit. But I generally stick to what I wrote about 4 years ago for this now. Wow. Whereas I did this Phantom book, or I did this World War One Irish war book there, both recently this year, and those were written for other artists. So I put a little bit more into the scripts, a little bit more descriptive. But that said, I would never dictate a shot to an artist, because I know, being an artist myself, a lot of people would rather they were left to their own devices when it came to the visual storytelling.
Mm-hmm. So, and then in terms of art, like how do you work? Are you traditional? Are you digital? Or are you some sort of mix of both?
I'm all traditional. Yeah, I'm not very digital. I mean, I think there's some great stuff being done digitally. It's just not really for me. Part of me feels like it has a little bit less soul or something when it's all done on the computer. But I mean, there's some amazing artists working digitally. It's crazy. Some of the times you can't even tell. So I told you I do those little thumbnails straight onto the script, and they're about 2 inches by 1.5 inches, and then I will scan those in, and they're pretty tight. Like I mean, they're not lollipop figures. They're actual figures and simple backgrounds, but they're not fleshed out. There's no facial features, say. So I will blow those up to what we call A3 over here. I think 11 by 17 is the American standard. Mm-hmm. The artboard size. So I will blow those up on Photoshop, and they're very rudimentary at that point, big blobby figures, and I'll change that to blue and print that out, blue line, and then Lightbox over that. I will do the finished inks. I've kind of eliminated traditional full pencils at this point. I kind of do a lot of finishes with ink now, because I'm just doing it long enough till I feel more confident that I can do it. So that cuts a few hours out of the process. So basically I go from layouts to almost to finished inks now, which is kind of crazy. Back in the day, I would have sat there anally noodling every line, but I think that's a confidence thing, you know what I mean? And then just go over every line with the pen again. I was just making more work for myself and losing a little bit of spontaneity at the same time. So I think this makes more sense. Mm-hmm. Works for me. I mean, I'm sure everybody has their own little twist on what their process is.
I actually, from talking to all the artists I have, it kind of seems like a common like evolution in art is like, when you first start out, you're trying to do everything the way you should do it, the way that like, it's accepted that you do, where you do like layouts and you do pencils and you do inks and you do pencils to a degree, and then the inks and etc. But it seems like the pencil stage is always the one that slowly but surely kind of goes by the wayside. Like I talked to Chris Somney, and Chris Somney says like his pencils are basically like nonsense at this point. Like they're just really, 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 really rough. And it sounds like, I mean, you're just kind of skipping that and going straight to the inks because you already have the blue line there.
Yeah, pretty much. Somebody's probably similar. Like his stuff lately is amazing. I think he's probably just got the confidence now to work. And I've seen his layouts in things like the Daredevil, the IDW special edition of his Daredevil run and stuff, where you can see his layouts and they're very tight. So I'd say he could ink straight off those, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask one question about photo reference. Now, I mean, obviously you are for all intents and purposes, you are Irish, but I'm curious, like, is that a tool you use a fair amount? And I know that there's like a weird kind of beef with it. Some people think it takes some life out of it, but I know, like, you talk to somebody like Steve Lieber who uses it, and it's just like a necessary tool to kind of bring like verisimilitude to the page. Are you conscientious of using it as a tool, but not letting the tool like define your work too much?
Oh yeah, definitely. I I use a good bit of photo reference. Absolutely. Obviously, every time. Well, not every time Irish is there. Sometimes in a tiny little picture, you'll see Irish, and he looks like a little cartoon, kind of a drawing from Tintin or something, where he's just got two dots for eyes or something. That would be the other extreme. But mainly, it is the photo ref stuff, definitely. Yeah. But I mean, I suppose to balance that, then most pictures of, say, Agent Moss you've seen in my book, I posed for those too. So
Wonderful.
I have got, if you saw my hard drive, the stuff I am doing as Agent Moss, it's hilarious. There's there's a scene in issue 1 of the new book of Dead to Reichs where Irish is he's kissing this girl, and I was taking the ref and playing both roles. So I've got like basically my sketch is kind of like me trying not just be kissing myself, which would be, I think that's ultimately where this book is going. Just me drawing myself, kissing myself. But yeah, no, but I would act out all the poses. But then, any of the shots where the characters are smaller or the camera is up or down or whatever, that stuff still has to be worked out fully. Like, you can only do so much with photograph, so I'm hoping it's a decent balance. I would like to use it less, but I don't think I'm confident enough as an artist to use it less at this point. And I mean, I don't know. I have mixed emotions about the whole thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think most people do, but at the same time, it's like, I don't think you do it in a way that makes it feel like you're like tracing or, just being ridiculous or, some of the things that people have problems with it. It feels organic still.
Well, that's the aim. So hopefully, I mean, I'm certainly like slavishly looking at the pictures most of the time as opposed to anything else. Like I was doing some Star Trek covers recently, and it was just, my monitor was just full of these pictures of Jonathan Frakes, which normally for me is a glorious thing. But I mean, I was so sick of looking at that beard. I think it's dangerous to lose the personality of your own art if you go too far with that, I think. So I'm just hitting a sweet spot. Sometimes I find myself just going a week where I don't use it, and then the next week I'm like, oh my God, I need references. It's impossible to draw. So it's kind of it morphs.
So this actually just gave me an amazing idea, and I really wish this would be a thing that could happen. I would love to like see somebody Kickstarter a book that's just like a book of artists posing for their own photo reference.
Oh man, it would be amazing. I've seen Dex ones. I've seen a few of the other Irish guys, Nick Roach. Like there's some seriously litigious stuff on there. You could ever. Oh boy, I remember I just sent a picture of myself in like these really these horribly skin tight like briefs just to freak Deck out. It was just like from the waist down on my camera on my computer that I had taken for God knows what reason for reference. And it was on Midnighter or something. And I just sent the picture to Deck with no subject line, just so he could open it up and get that full whack.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, whether he agrees or not, I don't know. I thought it was amazing.
Have you ever looked at Paulo Rivera's art blog that he has? It is, like his photo ref pictures are hilarious. I love them.
Yeah, I've definitely got stuff that can rival that. We got to get this Kickstarter happening.
It would be so good. I wanted to ask about, so you did a lot of license work early on. You did Angel, you did The Mummy, you did things like that. And one thing I've noticed about your work is you're exceedingly good at likenesses. Was that tied to it? Like, is that how you got that license work?
Yeah, if you can get typecast in comics, I was typecast in comics. Likenesses is one thing I feel like I used to be a portrait artist, and I would get hired to do all these portraits, the cheesy thing of sitting at a screening of a movie or a wedding or something, and you're doing, I was never great at like caricatures, but I was always pretty good at actually nailing what people looked like. Yeah. So a lot of people found this, it's great, get a picture at a wedding or whatever. I did a ton of that just to make money. So then my first book at IDW was a CSI book, Dying in the Gutters, it was called. That was 2005 or 2006. And whereas it was lacking in some places, they thought I did a really good job on the likenesses. So that kind of became that guy, which was not something I had wanted to happen, because I came to the guy who would do a good likeness of whatever the actor or actress, whoever they were. Especially if some people have clauses that they can approve the likenesses. In some books like Angel, the actors didn't have approval, but on CSI and I think maybe the A-Team and a couple of other books I did, they did. So, a lot of the time the publisher are very conscientious about the fact that they want it to look a lot like the actor or actress, which then in turn negatively impacts the book, I feel, because the more realistic the person looks, the less like a comic book it becomes, and it becomes more like a photo play or something, which you don't want. So it does deaden it in places. So I did want to get away from doing that. And that's one of the reasons I did Half Past Danger, because nobody in it had to look exactly like anyone except me. And even that I regret. There was a gag that went very far. Um, so yeah, I did become the go-to guy for that. So thankfully, I haven't really done much of it since, and I do turn down most of those jobs unless it's something like I just did some Star Trek work, and I'm a huge Star Trek fan, so that was like something I'd happily do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you want to be you want to do the best job you can at rendering these likenesses, but you don't want to become like Fumetti or whatever that stuff is. Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
it's a tricky balance. But so last question for real I have for you before we jump into 5 questions about Stephen Mooney the person. So I live in Anchorage, Alaska, which has
Cool.
basically
It's like Solid Snake.
what's what?
Doesn't Solid Snake live there? Or used to? Metal Gear? I don't know if you're a Metal Gear fan.
I do like Metal Gear. I have no idea about whether or not Solid Snake lived here.
Yeah, he was in Alaska for a while.
Well, awesome. I'll have to look for him. But we have basically like no comic scene here. There's like not, there isn't a big community of creators or anything like that. But you live, conversely, you live in, Ireland, and you're part of, for a while there was the art collective Eclectic Mix that was going on, and there's obviously like tons of creators. We've talked about a bunch of them. There's Big Bang and everything like that. It seems like there's a crew of people who actively supports each other and roots for each other, which I mean, it's something I've never experienced. I'm very curious as to what that experience is like. How much does having a community of people to lean on or help you as you're working as a creator and as someone figuring this gig out as you're going along, how much does that impact your ability to do your job and like your enthusiasm for your job, I guess?
I would honestly say it's probably immeasurable, I think, having a peer group like that, because we talk all the time. I mean, a lot of the English guys say this to us as well. It's like, maybe it's because the country is so small and we're all so closely located, but they all think we're ridiculously close. Like, we spend far too much time together. But it's so helpful. I mean, like I say, I send everything to the guys. We send it. It's like we round robin everything we do and get lots of harsh critiques on our own work, which is such an important thing to have. We go over each other's scripts, everything we do. We hang out all the time. It's pretty sad, actually. I don't know. I think it'd be so different. I mean, so many of my good jobs, like somebody like Declan has given to me, or the Wolverine book I did at Marvel a few years ago, Will Sliney got me that. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know, like, so it's there. People are very generous, and I've passed stuff on to other people. And I think the fact that the few of us now that are doing quite well in comics has, I hate to use the word inspired, but I think it's kind of started this groundswell of people in Ireland that are seeing it's possible to do this, and people can make somewhat of a living at this. And now they're all coming. There's so many good Irish colourists coming up with Trina and Chris Halloran, and Geordie's training all these people. Like, and we're all genuinely close friends. So as sickening as it is, yeah, we're kind of like a cult. We're
the cult of Irish comic creators.
Yeah, the Moonies. I'm going with the Moonies. That's not taken for cult, right?
It definitely sounds way better than this.
What I'm saying.
What's that?
We're all going to shoot ourselves.
Oh, no. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. Yeah. I do think I actually think it's really fantastic, though, because it's like I was talking to Jen Bartel on my podcast before about how important it is to have a community, and how like having people that are kind of all moving in the common direction, helping each other out and everything like that can really change everything for a creator. And it sounds like it really has for all of you guys. Yeah.
There's we somehow together we caused this momentum that we all sailed on, and it carried us all a certain amount of a distance, which I don't think would have happened had we been operating on our own in the ether somewhere without such a close knit peer group. Yeah, it's unquantifiable, really, but it's certainly a huge help.
Yeah, I mean, and you talked about how you weren't a big fan of Twitter earlier, but at the same time, it's like having a peer group like that, and having like, a city like Dublin that acts kind of as like a central location for everybody, and you can have cons, and you can go to Thought Bubble, you can do all these different things. It's like, because you have that community, it almost makes it so you don't have to follow like, that the Twitter route or the social media route. You can actually just have your homegrown community and work together, and I don't know, it's a bit more organic that way, I guess.
Yeah, it certainly works for us. I don't know what the chemistry is to it or how you manufacture it. I don't know. It happened. The Eclectic Mix blog was kind of the start of it. The 7 of us were all aspiring professionals, and then we all ended up doing it. So, I mean, it can't be a coincidence that we all got together and suddenly we all started getting professional work. There's definitely some sort of a chaos element there that kickstarted the whole thing, I think.
I do have to say I kind of miss those like art collectives because there was Eclectic Mix and there was Comic Twart and then there was like God, I'm trying to remember another one. There was oh no, I don't remember the other one was. But anyways, I always like really liked those, and then they just kind of they came and then they went really fast.
Well, I'll tell you why that happened is because we all got jobs.
You can't be
We couldn't
drawing
do
fun
them
stuff all
anymore.
the time.
That's exactly what happened. We just like we all had our own day of the week was how we worked ours, and then I know Deck went on to Comic Twart afterwards because that's totally his jam. Like he loves that sketch elements, and he's the perfect guy for that. But we just had deadlines then, whereas we didn't before. So that just has to fall by the wayside, unfortunately.
No, I mean, but I mean generally in the sense that you would expect more of those to pop up because it was
Oh
so
yeah, yeah.
successful
I
with
don't
you
know.
guys.
Is it because Blogspot's not a thing anymore? I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. There's still WordPress. You can still do things like that. I think it's interesting that there was this brief trend and then they
Yeah.
were gone.
It was definitely localized to within a couple of years. A few groups of us did it. I don't know
Hmm.
what. Yeah, why? Yeah, it's a good point. I wonder why there aren't more of those, or maybe there are, and we just aren't following it. I don't know.
We'll probably get some angry emails from all these art
Yeah,
collectives after this.
thanks a lot, guys.
It was Declan's fault. I don't even know how, but it was.
It's always Declan's fault.
It's a very safe bet. So let's finish with 5 questions about Stephen Mooney, the person, and they won't be about how it's Declan's fault. I want to start with a question that is tangentially related to Half Past Danger. It's a glorious
Yeah.
ode to adventure movies. If you had to pick one, what is your personal go-to adventure flick?
I don't even have to think about that. It's Raiders of the Lost Ark
Very solid choice.
with about 50 second place contenders. But
Well,
Raiders is the one I watch every few months, and it's set up everything the Slocum, the cinematography, the Spielbergian thing Jordy talks about, all that stuff is in Raiders. Like that's the purest form for me. When Indy takes a punch and he kind of shifts on his feet a little, and you're not sure whether he's going to go down or he's not, and then he raggles his head and he's fine. That's basically the tone that I was going for. You know what I mean?
hmm. Yeah, I mean that's what we were talking about earlier about how like the adventure movies. I think
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons why that Mummy movie worked as well as it did is because it was probably like the closest to being Indiana Jones that we've had since Indiana Jones without just being another Indiana Jones movie.
Exactly.
So I think it's probably safe to say that I know the answer to this. Okay, actually, I'm going to give you criteria on this. I'm going to give you some specific rules you have to follow. In we talked earlier about how Jordy described the Half Past Danger as Spielbergian. I imagine you have some Spielberg love in you. If you couldn't choose Indiana Jones or any Indiana Jones movie, what is your favorite Spielberg movie?
Jaws.
Jaws.
Next question.
I actually just watched Jaws for the first time last year, and I was like, I know, it's crazy. Like I've watched pretty much all the big movies you can possibly watch, but for some reason Jaws escaped me, and I watched it, and I was like, wow, this is a really good movie. This is crazy.
Excellent film. Yeah.
I do think that the open is somewhat unintentionally hilarious with like the drunk party people running out of the water.
Yeah, it's very much of its time. Yes. Yeah, I mean, there's so many Spielberg ones, like, but the ones I keep going back to are Jaws and Raiders,
Hmm.
and Close Encounters as well. But I'm not as much a sci-fi guy as the adventure stuff.
Hmm. I was curious if Jurassic Park was going to make the way, but that was,
Just Jurassic Park. I love it, but it's not. I mean, I don't watch it every few months. You know what I mean? It's a great film, but I don't think it's Raiders or Jaws good.
absolutely. All right, so next question, and this could absolutely cause a stir amongst your people in Ireland. If you could write and draw a Star Trek comic, and you could only have one captain from all of the shows and everything else, who would the captain be?
Look, this is what we. Every weekend we argue for hours about this, and I'm supposed to answer it in like a couple of seconds on this thing.
No, answer it as long as you want, but preferably not a couple hours.
Well, I mean, there's so many criteria, like you say. I mean, look, listen, it's either Kirk or Picard. I'm going to eliminate everyone else. There's a big argument we have for Janeway and Cisco, and I'm on board with that. I love both those characters. But if I want somebody who's as a leader, I wish I could say Kirk because he's the rock and roll choice. But to be honest, Picard is the one you want to keep you alive for the next 5 years or whatever how long your mission is. He's the one who's going to get you home.
Hmm.
Kirk will get you laid, but he might not get you home.
Well, I think he'll get you home. It's just a question of how many of your crew would actually get
Yeah.
home.
Depends whether you're wearing a red shirt or not, I guess.
Exactly. I don't know. I have to admit, I'm ride or die with Deep Space Nine. So
Oh, yeah. You and Deck must love talking about that. Jesus. Yeah.
I grew up watching that. That was my show. But all right. So next question: If someone came over to Ireland to visit, I love traveling. Who knows? Maybe I'll show up in Ireland.
You
What's the
should.
one place you would suggest they go?
Oh. Um. Hmm. Oh, the one place. I'd probably go to Geordie's place. Have you seen the penthouse they live in?
Oh, it looks wonderful in the pictures I've seen. Mostly, I see it in like the prism of pictures of Buffy.
Oh my God. No, that's my facetious answer. I totally would go there, but like tourist attraction wise, so much good stuff. Probably the college in Dublin called Trinity College, where they have this very, very old library that like houses every sacred Catholic text.
Oh
Not
wow.
that I'm a Catholic, but it's just so glorious to look at, and it's one of those amazing libraries you see photos of, where it's like hundreds and hundreds of yards of these old leather-bound books and these old gnarled wooden shelves. And then they have this chalice called the Ardagh chalice, and they have this big tome called the Book of Kells, which is like really lavishly illustrated by monks from whatever century it is. I don't know, 1966 or whatever. It's just this glorious thing to look at. It's such an amazing artifact. But listen, I know I'm from Ireland, but there's so much to see. It's crazy for such a small country. I mean, come on over. We'll show you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so Book of Kells, didn't they make an animated movie about that?
Yes, they did. Yes, it was an Oscar-nominated movie. Yeah,
Yeah.
or the director was in my class in college. Actually, he's a great guy.
Oh, that's
So he,
awesome.
yeah.
I know that what was the other movie that he had done?
the song,
The what?
the song of the sea.
Yeah. I remember seeing both those pop up. I'm a huge animation fan, and it's kind of amazing that I haven't gotten on to watching those two because I've heard so many good things about both
Oh,
of them.
you'll like them. You'll like them. They're gorgeous to look at, and they're so charming. Like they really, really encapsulate that kind of engaging, charming, old Irish sense of storytelling without airing into whimsy and colloquial crap. Like so, they just hit that sweet spot. You should check them out.
Hmm. I will. So, last question, and this I've been asking this a lot lately, but I'm always kind of curious about how people work. So, you talked about it earlier, 6 days a week, 10 to 12 hours working. You probably have things that you like to entertain yourself while working. What is your favorite thing to listen to while working? Are you a podcast guy? Are you a music guy? Are you like putting on like 10 seasons of Next Generation, or what's your
No.
deal?
The one thing I can't do is have a show running in the background because I can't. I'm too tempted to look up at the screen.
Hmm.
So it's all really audio stuff. So a good few podcasts like your own good self. A lot of commentaries, film commentaries, like director, cinematography, that kind of thing. I find that stuff really interesting. And then most music I listen to, no lyrics, just film scores, classical, that kind of thing. Again, because not that it's hard to listen to the lyrics, but it's more. I'll find myself singing along or thinking about the next sentence or whatever. But if I just have a classical, a lot of John Williams, it'll just get me in the zone and keep me there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can't work with lyrics at all. Like I can work in like menial my advertising job type stuff, but when I'm trying
Yeah,
to write or do anything like that, I find lyrics to be way too distracting. And I am all
yeah,
about the movie scores and the classical music as well. I don't know. I actually kind of transitioned to just mostly listening to that anyways, just because I find it so much more relaxing.
same. Yeah,
Yeah, John Williams, good choice, but I was a little. I guess I shouldn't be surprised given the fact that you're a big Spielberg fan. He is kind of his guy.
yeah, pretty much.
Uh,
Well, Superman and Raiders are my two favorite OSTs. So, I mean, my favorite comic book movie of all time is still the Donner in '78 Superman movie. I love that film.
well, that is certainly a good choice. I'm curious if you who outside of John Williams are your film score people.
Oh God, there's so many. A lot of James Horner. Michael Giacchino's getting really good now. He's
Yeah.
like, I know he's kind of the next Williams and all that, but he's got his own vibe. Like his Pixar stuff charms the hell out of me. Like the soundtrack for Up when it plays the tune where his wife is dying and everything.
Hmm.
Like I literally be choking up when that stuff is on, or the Incredible soundtrack stuff like that. Um, there's so many of them. God, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean those are good picks. I mean, my only problem with Giacchino is I kind of feel like he kind of borrows from himself a little bit more than I like. Like
That's
I kind of feel like his Star Trek score and his Doctor Strange score and God, one other movie I forgot was have like a lot of commonality between it, and
yeah.
it's almost distracting because I'm just like I feel like there's this one shot. Did you see Doctor Strange?
No,
Okay,
but I saw.
Well, there's this one shot where he's like flying up because he's got the cloak on and everything. And it's flying him up above the staircase. And I swear to God, it's like the exact same music that plays when like the Enterprise like flies out of the clouds at the end of into darkness. Yeah, and it's like it's got this like it's probably just like a general like feel type thing, but it feels so similar that I find it to be extremely distracting. I'm just like, don't borrow from yourself, Giacchino. You're better than that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I completely agree. I found the same with Danny Elfman. I used to be a huge fan, but I think his recent stuff has all sounded quite samey. And listen, I'm nobody to comment on his work. He's a genius.
Right.
And I'm sure people say the same thing to me, but I do understand what you're saying. There's that swelling, victorious note when, like you say, the Enterprise is going up to the clouds or whatever, and you get that beat in other movies, that plot point, I suppose. Maybe they do lean a little heavily on what has worked before, maybe. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But we've all done it.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of funny that I'm commenting. I'm just like, oh, listen to me, Michael Giacchino. I have everything to say about film scores.
I do actually agree with you.
But anyways, that's all I have for you, Stephen. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, it's good fun. It's good fun. I was looking forward to it. And I should say, I suppose, Half Past Danger 2 is out in early September, so tell people to stay tuned for that.
Oh, of course. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with cartoonist Stephen Mooney. You can find him on Twitter at Stephen_Mooney, on his website at halfpastdanger.com, and his work in the upcoming Half Past Danger 2 Dead to Reichs. If you're a fan of the show, there's some big news. Off Panel now has a Patreon. If you like the show and want to support it, consider backing on Patreon at patreon.com/offpanel. There are fun rewards and insider information you can get if you do. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Chris Palmer, Maxwell Schmidt, Dan Lee, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Lou Iovino, Christopher Carter, Nicholas Kesslake, Brian Dickerson, Greg Rucka, Ryan Mail, Adam Heifel, Nicholas Gardner, Andrew Corrigan, Fiona Staples, Chris Morris, Johan Brander, Chris O'Halloran, Mark Abnett, Matt Battaglia, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim DiMonacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. Don't forget to like the show on Facebook at /sketched, that's SKTCHD. Follow on Twitter at @sketchcomic, or follow me at @slicefriedgold. Want more from Off Panel? Subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and give the show a rating and review while you're at it. A quick thanks to the band Wolfpack, whose excellent track Outro from their album Volmilch opens and closes the show now. Give them a listen as they're totally rad. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.